Bridget, you're fading out. Try talking again. Okay.
Okay, how about now?
That's better. I can hear the dogs.
Yeah, that's probably why I'm fading out. Hang on.
All right. So we're going to get started because I'm going to have to um, end definitely on time, if not a little earlier, because I'm babysitting tonight, my grandson. And we started yesterday with the advent calendar for the first time. And instead of getting him one out of the commissary like I've done in the past for my kids, that's just filled with a whole bunch of chocolates, we actually got a ginormous one. And it has little drawers that you pull out. And I've had fun shopping, finding things. I had to take the little container because it's a very specific size in order to be able to make sure everything that I bought fit in them. So we started that last night. He'll be back tonight, but he's staying the night with us tonight. So I have some stuff to do. Oh, and by the way, just so you guys can see this, this is kind of an inside joke in my family. I'm the only person that has never broken my phone. John left his on the back of his truck and threw it in the middle of the road and basically shattered it. My middle daughter used to put hers in her back pocket all the time and has broken every phone she's ever had. So just it runs in the family, but not with me. So I don't have a new iPhone. I'm not one of those gadget people, but I had taken the case off of I had one of those otter cases, and I had taken it off so I could slip it in my pocket when I went to a car show with my husband. Well, at the car show, my daughter, son-in-law, and grandson shows up. So I have my phone, I'm sitting in my chair, and you know how the little folding chairs have the cup holders? So I had my phone sitting in the cup holder. My grandson, in 2 seconds, pulls my phone out and throws it in the road. This is what it looks like. It literally has chunks missing out of the back. The entire back of it is shattered. So, for the first time ever, mom has a broken cell phone. And that happened months ago. I've just kind of been nursing it along. Well, today, when I got ready to set up the show, I can't turn it on. It'll come on, but the front screen doesn't work at all. You can't unlock it. If you try to turn it off to reset it, it wants to call 911. So I think immediately after the show today, I am going to go get me a new phone, which I had been putting off because I want a Trump phone and I didn't want to have to do another Verizon phone, but I have to have my phone. So we're going to make a trip to the Verizon store after the show, probably with my grandson, which should be lots of fun. Speaking of 911, I actually got to call 911 today. I had an appointment first thing this morning. I'm driving home at a major intersection, and I want to describe to you what happened because this was the craziest shit. So the light's red. I'm on a very busy road, like one of the main roads in my hometown. I'm coming up to the intersection of another major road, like 6 lanes wide. Mine's about 6 lanes wide. I'm headed north. I'm in the slow lane. There's a semi with the cab and the trailer stopped at the red light. So I'm in my Supra and I'm probably 3 or 4 car lengths behind the truck, but there's no one in front of me. So I'm going to be pulling up next to the truck. And there's a white pickup truck kind of going right along with me. And he was a little ahead of me for some strange reason. I don't know if he was on his phone. He literally just plows into the back of the stop truck. I watched it happen. I was like, what the hell? So they're renovating the restaurant that's on the corner there, and it's all roped off. So there's no place to pull over or anything. So while I'm at the light, I call 911. The truck driver gets out. It's a very long light because it's a very busy intersection. The truck driver gets out and goes back. He's cussing because I had rolled down my window. I'm on the phone. I tell the 911 where the accident is, and I give him my information. So the truck driver is coming back. He's on the other side, and I just hollered over at him, "Hey, I've already called 911. I gave him my contact information. If you need a witness, I saw the whole thing." And the guy's like giving me the thumbs up. So that was crazy. I don't drive very often, and um I've never seen anything like this. It was surreal. It's just watching this truck literally not slow down, plow right into the back of the semi. So,
That
anyway,
is crazy.
it's crazy.
I'm just glad they didn't plow into you.
No. Oh my gosh. I don't even want to say what I would do. not on open lines. Yeah.
Right. Oh my God.
Yeah. But anyway, it was the craziest thing. So, anyway, I don't guess they needed a witness because it was so blatantly obvious what happened. Anyway, okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. We are on chapter 2, and this is kind of where we go into Herman Beebe. And I do want to go into him in a little depth because he's the primary mafia, although we did talk about the New Orleans mafia guy yesterday. But Beebe is kind of the highlight of this book as far as the ties to the mafia. So this starts off with in 1985, in March, a man by the name of Scott Susala and about 100 others were charged in what federal authorities said was a massive cocaine smuggling ring. FBI agents said then the group was responsible for bringing 20 to 25% of the cocaine being smuggled from Peru. 2 Peruvian ringleaders were the highest echelon of cocaine market in South America and Peru. Now, keep in mind, the Crystal Triangle is Peru, Bolivia, and Colombia. And although Peru grows the coca leaf, they're definitely not the primary lab entity. Colombia is, as we've learned. But this one was being ran out of Peru. While many of his co-conspirators were getting long jail sentences, Sousa pleaded guilty to possession of cocaine, a misdemeanor, and received a 1-year probated sentence. The more serious felony charges of conspiracy to possess cocaine with intent to distribute and the unlawful use of communication facilities were dismissed upon his plea deal. All of the records in this case, except the docket sheet, was then sealed in a San Diego courthouse. This was Susala's only official brush with the law, but federal law enforcement officials knew very well who he was because of his father and his financial mentor. His father was Edward D. Fast Eddie Susala. He was a manager and general partner of La Casa Spa and Hotel, a luxury resort north of San Diego. I was hoping War Hamster was in here because he's from San Diego. He could add a lot of color to this. It was controlled by the mob and built with Teamsters pension funds for the financing. Fast Eddie was brought in as a general partner in the early 80s by 3 of the 4 original partners. Allard Rowan, Roen, Irving Molasky, Molasky, and Merv Adelson. The 4th founding partner, Morris Mo Dalitz. And of course, we've heard about Dallas because he's mafia. He retired from La Costa in 1981. Dalitz, one of the most notorious mobsters in the country's history, had risen from the old Cleveland Mayfield mob to running Los Angeles casinos for the syndicate. An early Dalitz partner was Morris Kleinman, who was later involved in Paul Helliwell's Castle Bank, which, of course, was used to money launder drug money and mafia money for the CIA and the mob. You see how this whole book overlaps with everything that we've learned. He was also a registered agent for La Casa Land Company, which participated in the development of the resort. Also affiliated with this resort was Chicago attorney Burton Cantor, Kanter. He also was on the list of principals that was in charge of the Castle Bank, Paul Helliwell's CIA bank. Cantor has connections to several important people that we will read about throughout this book. In 1975, an article appeared in the Penthouse magazine. It was an expose on La Costa, saying it was established and frequented by mobsters. That article created a huge libel action in which a jury in 1982 cleared Penthouse, but a judge who turned out to have connections to some of the witnesses overturned the jury verdict with respect to Mulaski and Adelson. The parties eventually settled out of court. Penthouse didn't pay a penny, but gave a letter to Mulaski and Adelson saying it didn't mean to imply that the two were members of organized crime. The letter said nothing about Dalitz or Rowan. The latter, Rowan, a longtime Dalitz associate who in 1962 pleaded guilty to stock fraud. So, one big happy mobster family. And of course, Penthouse was basically vindicated in their assessment of what La Costa actually was. At La Costa, Canadian money replaced the Teamsters financing in 1984. And in 1988, a Japanese company purchased it. And keep in mind, we've already went over all of the Japanese mobsters and how they're all connected to this network. In the early 1980s, Scott Salusa was a playboy. He was an amateur golfer, tennis player, and didn't have a lot of money. He was not, by any stretch of the imagination, a businessman. But a very successful businessman picked him up off of the La Casa playground and used him in a world of big real estate deals and money laundering. The identity of that businessman could be read from the license plate of Salusa's BMW. It literally said THNX, thanks, BB, as in BB the mobster? Yeah, Herman K. Beebe, Sr., the mobster. Beebe was located in Shreveport, Louisiana. And just as an aside, you guys, in the early 2000s, one of my best friends, a fellow colonel, was assigned to Barksdale Air Force Base. He lived, and I've talked about him before, he lived in a very exclusive gated community with a golf course and a huge country club. And I was shocked the first time I visited him. My daughters and I were traveling out to be stationed in San Antonio, and we stayed a few days at his house. And very, very nice house, very, very wealthy neighborhood. And I mean, like mansion neighborhoods. He lived in what is called a zero lot line kind of, they call them garden homes. It was a single, no, he had it upstairs. But it was a small house in this neighborhood of mansions. And this is where Queen Latifah, Susan Sarandon, who literally lived right down the fairway from my friend. I actually saw her drinking coffee one morning when the girls and I went out for a walk. Um, Martin, the comedian, the black comedian, they all lived in this neighborhood. And my friend took us around on his cart and was showing us where all these people live. It was crazy. And then he goes on to explain to me that Shreveport, Louisiana, and we already know the CIA's and the mob is all through Hollywood and LA and all that other stuff. But to my shock, what I didn't know at the time is Shreveport, Louisiana was the only city in the country that had established fiber optics throughout its entire area that could handle piping the large quantity of data to shoot movies in the local area. And throughout that area down in southern Mississippi, a whole bunch of movies were shot. In New Orleans, a whole bunch of movies were shot. And they would take them to Shreveport and edit them and send them out to Hollywood. So a lot of the movie stars had bought second homes in this gated community. So I find it really interesting that Herman Beebe during, and obviously this was earlier than the 2000s, but it kind of goes to show you that there are these pockets of people that you would not normally associate living in an area because of the underpinnings of capability of these different cities. Now, of course, that's pretty much reduced in size in Shreveport because Atlanta now has the same capabilities. But at the time, in the early 2000s, Shreveport, Louisiana was the only other one that did. And it is a hotbed for mafia. So also remember Alabama was the where the guard unit was that was intimately involved in the Bay of Pigs. So there's a lot of stuff going on in that area. Louisiana, of course, featured prominently in the JFK with the mafia ties. So all of this kind of just goes hand in hand. All right, back to the story. So Susila was thanking him for all of the money that he had earned working real estate deals, which is money laundering, for Beebe. Beebe may have picked Susila out of Southern California primarily because he was the son of Fast Eddie. In 1985, a report on Beebe's banking activities by the comptroller of the currency noted, quote, because Beebe owns two residences in Southern California and spends the majority of his time there, speculation abounds that he is involved with financial institutions on the West Coast. To date, none of his California operatives or operations have been identified, unquote. Despite this red flag, no other reporter, other than the one writing this book, had investigated any of those ties. Susila stated on his resume that he, quote, formed a powerful alliance with financier Beebe to handle the bulk of his real estate investments, unquote. The name of that company is TLC Investments. It stood for Texas, Louisiana, and California, the three states where they were doing the bulk of the real estate deals. In San Diego, Susila was also a general partner with Beebe's son, H.K. Ken BB Jr. They had a limited partnership called Branch Office Limited. Ken Beebe, Herman Beebe's son, listed Susela's home in Sorrento Valley as his California address in the partnership documents, demonstrating that they had used each other's home addresses for business purposes. In addition, Beebe got Susela together with Vernon Savings and Loan owner Don Dixon, with whom he had developed condominiums associated with championship golf courses located next to La Costa. Beebe and Susela's also got caught up in a lawsuit involving a bank loan to a La Costa travel agent. Beebe, Scott, and Fast Eddie had guaranteed a $75,000 loan from San DeQuinto National Bank to the Tour Company. That was the name of their travel agency. It was headed by a guy by the name of Stephen Leo, who, like Ken Beebe, also listed the address of Scott Susela in the business drafting documents. Also hanging out at La Costa with Beebe and the Suselas were the former All-American wide receiver from Arkansas and then star with the San Diego Chargers, Lance Bambi Allworth. There was also a former Texas state senator, Peyton McKnight from Tyler, who later broke with the group because of a $1 million loan to Allworth that he lost. Also, Houston developer Kenneth Snitzner, who we talked about yesterday, who was a close associate of Michener and the Marcella Mafia family, was involved in all of this. In a letter to the author, Snitzner stated, "I do not know Herman Beebe. I have never done business with him. I have never socialized with him. I would not know him if he walked into the room." He also said that he did know Eddie Susela, that he had known him for years, and that he had socialized with him at La Costa Country Club. During the research this author did, he was told by California journalist Mary Fricker that sometime during the late 70s or early 80s, Beebe was negotiating with some San Diego people to buy a gambling casino in Nevada. His partners were known to the San Diego Police Department as having organized crime connections. The San Diego police had contacted the New Orleans Crime Commission about Beebe. The casino deal eventually fell through. The FBI had discovered in the late 1970s that Beebe's friend and partner, Lance Allworth, the football guy, had done business with Alan Glick, the Chicago mob frontman, in several Las Vegas casinos. Also around the same time, Glick's company was a beneficiary of a fraud deal at Beebe's connected Houston bank, which we'll go into a little bit later. Beebe had been coming to play at La Costa, his home away from home, for a long time. The public records show his first appearance at La Costa due to a financial statement that he submitted to the Texas Insurance Department while he was applying for permission to start an insurance company there. This statement said he owned 50% of a house in La Costa. It was dated 1972. San Diego deeds records show that his wife, Mary, deeded him her interest in the house the next year. Also, a fellow Louisiana businessman, one of Beebe's early backers and mentors, deeded him and his wife half interest in a lot in La Costa. The older man was Charles Waters. He was an insurance man who was caught in 1965 by the SEC in a stock scam with Beebe. The two were ordered not to mislead or withhold information from investors in American motel industries. The next year, because they only got a slap on the wrist, Beebe got a piece of his first bank. So the SEC knows this guy's a mobster and basically does nothing to him. And the next year, feeling protected, he buys an interest in Bossier Bank and Trust. It's located across the river from Shreveport. Beebe then proceeds to build a small empire of banks, hotels, nursing homes, and insurance companies, all done to launder money. By 1985, a study by the Comptroller of the Currency found his footprint in more than 110 banks and savings and loans in over 8 states. He's mafia. He ended up doing 10 months in jail for bank fraud in 1989. And he became known afterwards as the godfather of the dirty Texas savings and loans scandal. There's little in Beebe's background to predict that he would become this notorious financial criminal, except, early. Obviously, from the time he was associated with the mafia, it's all predictable. But he grew up very poor and even so he went to college, Northwestern State University in Natchitoches, where he ended up being employed as a janitor for his room and board. He had a college roommate there by the name of Raymond Reed, who was very, very outgoing and was notorious on the campus. Beebe ended up dropping out of Northwestern to go into the Navy at the end of World War II. He re-enrolled in Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge, where he ended up getting his bachelor's degree. The Korean War happens and he re-enlists in the Navy. When he got out, he had no intentions of going back and working a normal job. He just wanted to make money. So he starts selling insurance. He moved to Alexandria, Louisiana, and by 1958 was the vice president of Savings Life Insurance Company. 3 years later, he formed his own company, American Motel Industries. He also created kind of like an overarching company that used the initials from American Motel Industries, AMI. In the late 60s, after he had his run-in with the SEC and had bought a few banks, he moved to Shreveport and set up his empire. He would then come to the attention of the Louisiana State Police and the New Orleans Metro Crime Commission. During this time, Louisiana State Police conducted extensive surveillance of New Orleans Mafia family Carlos Marcello, and of course picked up lots of information about Beebe because he had a close association with him. They were also monitoring Marcello's personal attorney, Philip Smith. On the inside of the door leading out of Marcello's office at the Town and Country Motel was a sign. It said, 3 can keep a secret if 2 are dead. That's a weird sign to have on your office door, unless you're mafia. Attorney Aaron Cohn, a former FBI agent and the leading expert on the New Orleans Mafia, called Smith the messenger boy lawyer for Marcella. One day, Louisiana State Police tracked Smith to a meeting with a hotel and insurance man from Alexandria. That would be Herman Beebe. There was a lot of contact at the time between Beebe and Marcella. They both had interest in Holiday Inns and nursing homes. Cohn was a very shrewd man. He died in 1990, shortly after being diagnosed with cancer, which is interesting because I'm reading another book right now that talks about this aggressive, fast cancer that somehow afflicts people that are either whistleblowers or witnesses. It's really, really weird.
That researcher May, that's what she died of, an extremely fast moving cancer.
Yes. Brussels. Wasn't that her last name?
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
I had a
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
a second.
Yes.
Remember her last name.
Yes. And she was exposing a lot of this a long time ago.
Right.
Okay. He, however, had survived 30 years in the heart of this mafia organization, according to the Metro Crime Commission. Marcella controlled at least 5 Holiday Inns in Louisiana through front companies and close associate. I'm not even going to try to say this name. It's OCCHIPINTI. Okipenti Brothers. Beebe owned at least 6 Holiday Inns in Texas and Louisiana, including one in New Orleans that was a hotbed of mafia activity. He would later put that hotel up for collateral on a loan guarantee for his close associate, Don Dixon, to buy the infamous Vernon Savings and Loan. Now, what you're going to find out through this story is this collateral thing. The way they do it is it's not collateral like you and I would assume it is, because there's like 3 or 4 other contracts put on it where they don't really ever put anything up for collateral, which is exactly what happened when the savings and loan crash happened and the FDIC and all the investigators were trying to untangle all of the quote unquote collateral. In many cases, there was no collateral. Another Holiday Inn Beebe owned was in a small town in Texas called Denton. According to AMI's annual report in 1976, in a book called Brothers in Blood, Marcello expert David Chandler states that in the 1960s, a wealthy Louisiana mafioso, hounded in their home city, spread over Texas, they bought controlling shares in at least 3 banks, and their investments reached into towns as small as Denton. The researcher went on to say one of Houston's largest builders began a series of real estate negotiations with Marcella, meaning the mobster. Although Chandler's bank didn't name Beebe per se, the next year, Dallas Morning News did, in a groundbreaking series of articles on a circle of Texas banks being looted in what was referred to as the Texas Rent-A-Bank scandal. Reporters Earl Golz, Golz, and Dave McNeely made the allegation that Beebe had associations with mobsters, including Marcello's and his attorneys. In addition, the Dallas Morning News stated, quote, usually reliable federal sources report that Bossier Bank and Trust, Beebe's bank, is suspected as being a conduit for funds skimmed by organized crime from Las Vegas gambling. It is then placed in foreign banks in numbered accounts. Beebe's business partner, former Texan politician Ben Barnes, was also named in the morning news stories. Barn promptly sued the Dallas paper for libel to the tune of $20 million. Beebe then had Bossier Bank and Trust sue the newspaper as well in federal court for $12 million. Both lawsuits were dropped. The morning news didn't run any retractions, nor did they pay any damages. It agreed to Barnes and Beebe's request to keep all records of the case sealed in the federal court. These records allegedly contained additional information tying Beebe to the Mafia, including a secret report by an organized crime division of the Texas Attorney General's office. In December 1988, more than 12 years after the first story on Beebe came out in the Dallas Morning News, they published a story on Beebe's interesting bank and savings and loan network, which showed connections between him and Marcella. The paper's reporters, Alan Puzey and Bill Lodge, found the mob boss, Carlos Marcello, his son Joseph, and some of their companies were regularly doing business with Beebe's Pontchartrain State Bank. According to a deposition by Pontchartrain President James McKigney, Marcello's Pelican Tomato Company had loans from and deposits with Pontchartrain, as did his son. Interesting to note that we know the whole fruit and vegetable covering up drugs, perfect disguise. McKigney was a close associate of Beebe's as well, and would later become chairman of the board and CEO of Bossier's Bank and Trust. Huh, that's interesting. The morning news also discovered that Marcello's business associate, John Drew Langford, tried to purchase Beebe's bank called Colonial Bank in New Orleans. Langford was offered the bank with the condition that he put up $1 million loan as collateral at Pontchartrain State Bank. Langford put up 1,700 acres that were owned by Marcella's Marsh Investment Corporation. So I'm going to buy a bank and I'm going to use a mafia's real estate investment, which was money laundered into real estate, as the collateral for the bank. Marcello testified that Langford was a business partner and Marcello wanted to help him with the Pontchartrain loan. The morning news also discovered another link between Beebe and Marcello through one of his attorneys, Anthony Grappanino. How many attorneys does this guy have? Probably a lot, because he's doing hundreds of millions of dollars worth of business, money laundering. This attorney was the director of Sunbelt Life Insurance Company, headquartered in Beebe's Shreveport offices. Not just in Shreveport. He actually was co-located with the Mafia Don. Another Beebe business deal that went bad involved one of his close associates, Richard Odom, who in the early 1980s was CEO of Beebe's umbrella company, AMI. The victim of this deal, a Mississippi businessman, received a phone call out of the blue from Carlos Marcello, making an unsolicited offer to help settle his problem with Beebe. The details of the case is this. Odom bought First United Bank in Meridian, Mississippi, then transferred more than $13 million in loans from Bossier's bank to First United. So he buys a bank and he transfers $13 million in loans from a mobster's bank to his bank. When Bossier failed in the summer of 1986, it took down this guy's bank, First United, because none of the loans are actually collateralized. This failure led to a lawsuit between First United's receiver, the FDIC, and Paul Broadhead. Broadhead is a business leader from Meridian, Mississippi, and he was also the co-owner of Cinemark theater chain. Broadhead, who said he once was Odom's best friend, was brought into the suit because he had guaranteed Odom's loan from M Bank Dallas to buy First United. You see how they're doing this? This is like music. It's like the cups with the nut under it, and you move them around on a board. And then whoever gets caught, all of these rest of these domino effects, they're all going to fail. Broadhead told the author that during the BB instigated lawsuit against him, he received a phone call from Texarkana's federal prison. It was Carlos Marsala. He had been sentenced for bribery. The Mafia Don made an astounding offer to help Broadhead with his banking problems and also with a problem that he had with U.S. Customs in New Orleans, which had confiscated a sword owned by Broadhead. How does the Mafia control U.S. Customs? Isn't U.S. Customs the one responsible for keeping the drugs out? Yes. During this struggle against BB and First United, in his effort to escape liability for First Union's failure, Broadhead located a Dallas pawn shop owner by the name of Raymond Rose, who had served time in federal prison with Marcelo. Rose informed Broadhead that Marcelo told him he was involved with BB, which we already know. After connecting the links between BB and Marcelo and the Teamsters Union, Marcelo had actually told this guy and undercover FBI agents in 1979 that the mob owned the Teamsters. Marcelo was referring to himself, meaning the mob, as well as Chicago, Detroit, Kansas City, and Florida mafia families. The President's Commission on Organized Crime confirmed in 1986 that the Teamsters had been firmly under the control of organized crime since the 1950s. BB's longtime presence at La Costa underscores his likely connections to Teamsters because it was Teamsters' union pension funds that was used to finance the building of it. Joe Cage, the U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Louisiana, and one of BB's chief nemesis, is convinced of that connection. Cage won 2 fraud convictions against BB. He believes that BB got a great deal of his power and authority from Teamsters, i.e., the Mafia. Cage told the author a story of Terry Wilkinson and William Wortley. He explained how Wilkinson is a BB man from Oklahoma City who owned a nightclub there. Wilkinson hung out with the Mafia at the Jockey Club in Miami and would stay with BB whenever he went to San Diego at La Costa. One day, a Houston businessman, Albert Pravat, who turned state's evidence against BB, told Cage that in 1983, Wilkinson told him that he had lost a good friend, Alan Dorfman. Dorfman was a mob associate from Chicago. He helped the mob control Teamsters and their pension fund, like funding the La Costa development and much of the Los Angeles casinos. Dorfman had been convicted of racketeering and gunned down in a Chicago parking lot. Dorfman's longtime attorney, Chicago lawyer Harvey Sillette was represented Chicago mob lawyer Sidney Corsack and Chicago attorney Burton Cantor, who had represented mob associates involved in La Costa. And then he turns out to need a lawyer himself. Siletz also represented drug smuggler Jack DeVoe and Florida money launderer Lawrence Freeman. They were all associated with the Mafia and CIA. And that's another pattern that we see often is you always look up who the attorneys are on any of these court cases, both in the US Attorney's Office and who defends them. Because oftentimes they latch on to a defense attorney and they represent multiple mobsters. And they even represent people who don't know who they are in order to throw cases, kind of like what they did to General Flynn. Cage said that another of Beebe's associates, William Wortley, is a Chicago thug and Teamsters enforcer who is now in federal prison in Kentucky on weapons charges. Wortley and Beebe owned a barge company together, according to Cage, the investigator. Art Leeser, a former chief examiner for the Texas Savings and Loan Department, the guys who's supposed to be keeping track of all of these mobsters owning banks, who knew more about the Texas Savings and Loan than anyone except Beebe, believes that there is something to Cage's theory about the Teamsters backing of Beebe. As soon as Beebe got involved in surety savings in Houston in the mid 1970s, Teamsters union pension funds started pouring in. Another connecting link between Beebe and the Teamsters and the mob was in business dealings of a guy by the name of Morris Schenker, Schenker. He was a St. Louis attorney who owned Las Vegas casinos. He also represented Teamsters head Jimmy Hoffa and was associated with mafia families in Chicago, St. Louis, and Kansas City. Schenker and Beebe were bailed out of problem investments by a bank called Southmark. Well, technically, Southmark was not a bank. Southmark was a large entity that they used to buy. It's like a REIT, what we call that today. It was a real estate investment, but it also had deposits of money used to buy real estate. So if REITs were available back then, that's what it would be called. And again, they use that for money laundering. Schenker was also a borrower at Liberty Federal Savings in Louisiana that was controlled by a San Antonio guy by the name of James Haig. Haig was involved in the savings and loan debacle, which included John Riddle and George Aubin, and involved borrowing hundreds of millions of dollars from Beebe controlled savings and loan and then defaulting on the loans, leaving us with the bill. Crazy. So in the 70s, there was an organized crime strike force that was being ran out of the Texas Attorney General's office. It also connected Beebe to Carlos Marsala. The man who prosecuted Beebe for bank fraud, U.S. Attorney Joe Cage, the guy we've been talking about, testified under oath that he had never had any suspicion that Mr. Beebe was tied into the mafia and has no evidence of that in his files. However, Cage made these statements in July 1987 under questioning by Beebe's attorney, Gary Spence, the cowboy lawyer from Wyoming, who was trying to show the U.S. attorney's prejudice and disqualify Cage from prosecuting Beebe. But when the author spoke to Cage in a couple of years later and asked if he had any evidence linking Beebe to Marsala, he noted some interesting connections. He just didn't have them to prove in court, and he didn't want to be disqualified from prosecuting Beebe by prejudicing himself. Cage told the author that Shreveport businessman Harry Hart had received loans from a Beebe Bank State Savings and Loan in Lubbock, Texas. Hart's attorney is Mike Moran, who is also Marcella's Shreveport attorney. Keep it in the family. It was Maroon who traveled to Guatemala in 1961 to be with Marsala after Attorney General Robert Kennedy had the Mafia boss abruptly deported. In addition, when Marsala came to Shreveport, he usually hung out at Eddie's Supper Club, which is exactly where Beebe hung out all the time. Cage said that Beebe was an instrument of the Teamsters, and that represented the organized crime. In an affidavit by Cage in response to Beebe's attempt to disqualify him, Cage explained the connections of Edmund Reggae, a Louisiana attorney, judge, and power broker, and close business associate of Beebe's, with organized crime, Mafia, and La Costa Nostra figures. That's the Italian Mafia family intimately involved in drug trafficking that was and everything else that was taken down in 2019. Cage further stated in his affidavit that Beebe had close associations to former and current Louisiana Governor Edwin Edwards. Beginning in 1980, shortly after Edwards left the governor's office, AMI, Beebe's company, and other Beebe owned or controlled companies paid Edwin Edwards, the former now governor, $100,000 a year for apparently nothing. Edwards was also close to Marsala. During the 1979 investigation of Marsala, undercover FBI agents tape recorded Marcello talking about Edwards. This is what he said. Edmund, meaning Edwin Edwards, and me, all right, but I can't see him every day. He's the strongest son of a bitching governor we ever had. He effed with women and he plays dice games, but he won't drink. How do you like that? Unquote. There was additional evidence linking Beebe to the Mafia in the form of a statement by Houston dentist filed in state court in Houston. Dr. James Fairley first discusses how he was brought into a savings and loan near Houston in the mid-1970s by its owner, W. Carroll Kelly. He was forced to buy stock in the savings and loan in order to avoid the savings and loan foreclosure on his real estate loans. So the savings and loan is going bad, and he didn't want his loan foreclosed on, so they basically coerced him into investing in the bank. Kelly had consolidated his ownership in this bank, which later became Continental Savings and Loan, through loans at Michener's Allied Bank that were guaranteed by Beebe. Kelly and his fellow investors purchased this bank from Senator Lloyd Benson. Kelly told the savings and loan regulators that he was Beebe's representative in Texas and took Beebe to meet with them when Beebe was getting into Texas savings and loans. Dr. Fairley further revealed that Kelly's ex-partner, Daryl Tomlin, had done him a favor and furnished him with an affidavit linking Kelly to Marcello. Fairley used this damaging affidavit to sever his ties with Kelly. He further tied Kelly to Marcello when he stated, quote, later, a black man, Wilbert Bordeaux, whom I first met as a construction superintendent and later worked for me, confirmed Tumblin's statement that Kelly and Marcello, since he had gone to New Orleans to do some remodeling for Kelly in Marcello's kitchen. These were favors to the dawn from Kelly and Tumblin, unquote. Fairley goes on to link Beebe and Marcello by stating that Herman Beebe was a player in the relationship between Kelly and Marcello. Also, the Bossier Bank in Louisiana, Beebe's bank, had a part in all of this financing. He went on to say that he had met Beebe at Whitehall Hotel with Kelly. They had brunch together, and Kelly was acting like a lapdog to the mob boss. Tomlin said later that Marcello controlled Continental through stock owned by Beebe, like in a mustache deal that we explained in the first week. When the author reached Tomlin in his Sarasota, Florida restaurant, he said he couldn't remember anything about this. A few months later, Tomlin was indicted by a federal grand jury in San Antonio, along with an aide to former Nevada Senator Chick Hecht on charges of conspiring to pressure federal regulators to help them buy failed savings and loans at bargain prices, on charges of conspiring to use those savings and loan in order to corner a spice market in Grenada. Grenada, like the country that we invaded and overthrew its government? Yeah, that same one. Even if Beebe didn't admit to being a mobster, he certainly enjoyed acting like one and leaving the impression that he was one. One of the former Texas Savings and Loan chief examiners told the author that when Kelly brought Beebe in to meet him, Beebe looked at me and said there had been some bad things said about him. You let me know if someone says something bad about me, and I'll squash them like a cockroach. He was brave enough to say that to a bank examiner because he knew he could follow through on it. That's the end of that chapter. That's crazy. That's literally crazy.
Absolutely.
And the connections to politicians is something that should disturb everybody. Go ahead, SR. Sorry, Bridget. I'll go to you next.
Thank you, Colonel, and thank everyone for attending here on X and on Rumble. Going through some of this information that I dug up, there's also, which I don't believe has really been gotten into or not that I've heard of at this point in time, but Beebe was also involved with Palmer Bank.
We're going to get to Palmer Bank.
Is Iran-Contra.
We're going to get to Palmer Bank. You're skipping ahead.
Okay.
No, but, and this book is where I got that information. That's Stefan Halper, the guy that was in part of the CIA's setup of Russiagate. Stefan Halper, the MI6 guy, opened a bank called Palmer Bank in Washington, D.C., and it was used to money launder Iran-Contra funds. Same guy. He was intimately involved in the Iran-Contra money laundering, and then weirdly gets hired at the Office of Net Assessments in the Pentagon, which is the belly button for the CIA, into the Pentagon to run the Russiagate fiasco. Yes. And everybody knew. Yeah, everybody knew what his background was.
Sorry about that, Colonel.
Go ahead.
The other thing I would suggest for people here on this board, take a look at how many representatives either own stock in banks or own a bank through family ties.
Yeah, a lot of them.
You're going to find quite a bit of them.
And thank you, Ray, for putting over on Rumble Operation Urgent Fury 1983. That is the Grenada overthrow. And that is going on while the Mafia and the CIA are trying to corner the market on the spice industry in Grenada. That's not a coincidence, people. Thank you for putting that up, Ray. All right. Bridget, what do you want to say?
Oh, I get such a kick out of how you could follow the lawyers to make so many connections amongst these people, and how you can, whenever they need, I don't know. I go back in my head and I think, if hypothetically we shut all of their shell companies down, how many companies would be left standing? Just like the bank. You know what I mean? It's like it's so prevalent. It's so prevalent. It just it's grotesque.
And that's why the information that Stellar provides as far as locking the dollar into a blockchain type infrastructure is so important, because the tracking of the money then becomes transparent. And there's been so many things in the past that could have fixed this, like the Promise software that they stole from Inslaw. One of the things that it did was it was able to track the basically what in the bottom assessment is money laundering, because it was able to compute all of this data, and it would have stuck out like a sore thumb. So of course the CIA co-ops it so they can see everybody else's money laundering, as well as Mossad. They got their copy of it, but they could also cover up their own. Yeah, it's crazy. Illini, did you have something you wanted to add?
Hey, Colonel, I've caught some of the end of this. I guess the one thing that I would add is you mentioned Continental Savings and Loan. This is distinct from Continental Bank, which I think you probably mentioned, but this is not Continental Bank of Illinois. This is Continental Savings and Loan of Texas.
Correct.
And the one thing that surprises me in this whole thing is that, Continental Bank of Illinois got brought down by Penn Square Bank of Texas back in 1984. It was the very beginning of the oil crash causing the S&L crisis. Continental Bank basically, a new CEO took over after David Kennedy, and they did a whole bunch of oil field loans to Penn Square Bank in the 70s and the 80s, and then they all went bad. And the one thing that surprises me about this whole thing is that if you take a look at the index of the book, there's not a lot of mentions that Pete Bruton does of Penn Square Bank or Continental, which we know, was involved with Vatican Bank and some of the money transfers there for Operation Gladio. And that's the one thing that I find surprising.
Yeah. And again, this is one guy that occasionally had a partner. So just put that in context. Back in the day when no one knew what Operation Gladio was. But as you state, Penn Square Bank does play a part towards the end of the book in this whole round robin. And you're right. And then that ties to Continental, which for those of you who haven't followed along the whole time, I'll just refresh your memory. The Continental Bank in Chicago was where Archbishop Marcinkus he used that bank for the Vatican banking when he was the Archbishop in Chicago. And why is that important? Because we know on the Italian mafia side, um, all of them profess to be Catholic, and that the Vatican Bank is up to their eyeballs, probably over their head, in money laundering for the mafia in Operation Gladio. And so part of our research uncovered Marcinkus and his ties to the Continental Bank and all of this stuff that's going on. Well-known mafia use of that bank. It also was the Chicago Vatican Archdiocese Bank. Marcinkus, follow on assignment from Chicago, was basically what they refer to as the Secretary of State entity, which is a sovereign within the sovereignty of the Vatican that runs the Vatican Bank. So he went from being a branch manager of the Vatican financial system in Chicago, full of mobsters, to Rome to be the master banker of all of them. And throughout the investigation of Gladio, all roads kept leading back to the Vatican Bank on the money side. And eventually, because of the murder of Calvi, who was the guy that was running the bank, Ambrosiano, however you say that, the all of those roads keep leading back to the Vatican. And so the Italian, although the Vatican Bank is not under Italian banking authority, they wanted to subpoena Marcinkus. And what happens? The CIA and the State Department brings, although he had a pending subpoena against him, they bring him back to America, put him in Arizona, where he dies of natural causes, several years later, and refused extradition to Italy repeatedly. So what Illini was just pointing out is very, very important to the overall story. And it is all tied together. And I don't know what happened to him. He disappeared. Okay. Anybody else got anything? Nope. All right.
I got snow, but that's all I got.
All right. I'm not going to tell you how hot it is here today.
Oh, it just snapped.
We got a little bit of rain early this morning, but and supposedly a cold front, but it's not cold here at all. That just means it's like 70 instead of 80.
Yeah, 20. It was 19 this morning, so I don't want to hear it.
I have a bedroom. I have a bedroom. I have a bedroom. Yeah, I have a bedroom anytime you want to thaw out. Did you want to add anything else, Illini?
Nope. Sorry, Colonel. I got thrown off for a second. But
okay.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. All right, guys. I'm going to have to go hit the telephone store, unfortunately. All right. Thanks for being here today. We will be back tomorrow. And we also have, I'm going to be on a show tonight. I will post the details of that at 9:00. It's the first time I've been on this guy's show. So I will, once I get the information, I will post it on my profile. And what else? I think that's it. So with that, we're going to close, and I will see you guys tomorrow at 4 and tomorrow night at 9:30 on the Alpha Warrior Show. Take care, everybody. All right. See you guys later. Thanks for being here.